Did he steal your headphones? No. Because that's one thing I did. I stole my number 41 powder blue jersey with the lightning bolts on the shoulders. I stole that when they cut me. I left everything else, but I stole the jersey.
Yeah.
So.
You still have it?
Yeah, I sure. Whoops.
That's all right.
Marshall, get some decent equipment in here.
Yes.
How did a young wide receiver for the San Diego Chargers become involved with the NFL films?
Well, I never had any idea that there was such a thing as the film industry. I went to the movies on the weekend, took a date, you know, it was fun. I didn't ever think there were people that worked in the movies. And so I was just fortunate enough to have a good college career and high school career as a football player. And I also decided I didn't want to just be a jock my whole life. So I was an English major and graduated in English. So I had a writing career as well. I wrote for a daily newspaper in California during the off season of my brief NFL career. And so the PR director of the San Diego Chargers approached me and said, I saw this article that you wrote for the newspaper. Did you keep a diary of your rookie season? Because I was a rookie free agent. So I was on the other side of the scale of a guy named Jerry Kramer, who was an all-pro, who wrote a diary about his season that ended in the NFL championship against the Dallas Cowboys. And he wrote a diary called 4th and 1, and it was a big hit. So the PR guy said, it's too bad you didn't keep a diary. And I said, I did. I kept a diary. And I hadn't, but I went home and wrote one. I wrote one feverishly, you know, a stream of conscious on napkins and the back of programs and everything, so it didn't look like it was a fake. And he took it back to New York, and it was published in Sport Magazine called How I Won My Lightning Bolt. And that was coming out during my second summer camp with the Chargers. That issue came out. And so I was out of practice, and I heard the name Ed Sabol called out across the practice field. And I didn't know what that meant, except I'd seen his name on credits on television. So I boldly approached him at lunch with the magazine, with my article in it. And he was sitting there at lunch, and I said, I'm Phil Tuckett, I'm on the team, I wrote this article. I didn't know how it connected to what he was doing, except he was on television, it had something to do with sports. So he picked it up and looked at it, and it was in diary form, and he read the first day's entry and closed the magazine. And I thought, well, that was short-lived, whatever that was, that's over. And he looked up at me and he said, you're wasting your time playing pro football because you can write. I've never met a football player who can write. You need to come with me. I have a company called NFL Films as part of the NFL. And you're a football player and you can write. And you're wasting your time playing football. How long is that going to be? 3 years? 4 years? I'm going to teach you a profession you can do the rest of your life. And you'll have fun, you'll make money, and it'll make your life a pleasure for the rest of your life. Football can't do that, but making movies about football can. And so I had to turn him down because I was on the team. You know, I wasn't going to walk away from that. I'd been playing since I was 8 years old, so I couldn't drop that. So just at lunch, he tried to talk me into quitting and coming with him. He says, you got to come with me right now because when the season starts, I want you in place working with my production crews. And I had to turn him down. And when I walked out of there, I thought, that is so weird because that came out of the blue. and now I just turned down what could have been a great job, but oh well. Excuse me. 2 weeks later, I got cut. I went to the coach, Sid Gilman, with my playbook, and he said, "We've decided to let you get on with what you're going to do the rest of your life." How's that for a euphemism? For him telling you, you suck, and we don't want you around. And so it was kind of a killer. But I remember that I'd gotten Ed Sabol's business card. I called my wife to come pick me up at summer camp, and I called Ed Sabol, and he hired me over the phone. And I worked there for 38 years. And he was my guru and everything I know about film, and the fact that there were human beings that worked behind the scenes to make the films, he showed me how all that could be done.
Ed Sabol was a pioneer with NFL films. When you look back now, how fortunate were you to be paired with him?
Well, it was Valhalla, all these cameras, editing machines. Of course, back then we didn't do it digitally. We sat at a bench, a Steenbeck editing bench, and picked up the pieces of film and spliced them together. I mean, real covered wagon stuff. And but everything I know about production, I learned by doing. Ed Sabol gave me a job or an assignment to do a pregame piece for the CBS in the season that was just coming up, because I'd been cut during the preseason, now the season was coming. And he turned it over to me, and I produced it, and it went on the air. And it was about the hardest hits of the season before. I looked at that piece recently, and every one of those hits would have had the player who made the hit banned for life in the NFL. But back then, they were just, we just said that's the violence of pro football. We called them snot bubblers, because when you hit somebody so hard, a little bubble of snot comes out your nostril. They were snot bubblers, and everybody went, "Oh, wow, great, look at that." That's what football's all about. Now, that's not what football's all about. And either for the good or the ill, I don't know. I was a wide receiver, and I got hit hard enough to be knocked unconscious. And I still have a few brain cells to work with. So it was what we considered football was all about back in the day. But I did that piece. I didn't know what I was doing, but I learned by doing it. And now that I'm running the film program at Dixie State University, I developed the film program from nothing, and I did it the same way we developed NFL films. There were 10 people in the company, and there were 4 students when I got to Dixie that wanted to take some film classes. And so for the 10 years I've been there, when I wasn't sure what to do next, I would think about, well, what did we do at NFL Films when we were just getting into this next thing, and how did we make that transition? And that has informed everything I've done with the film program, including a freshman comes in, like this young lady, and we say, here's an assignment. And it's an important thing. It'll be seen. It'll be not buried somewhere. And we'll give you, the information that you need to succeed, but the only way you can figure it out is by doing it. We don't sit in a classroom and ad infinitum theorize about how films are made. We're out doing the job. And I wasn't in academia. I was in making movies. I was in a production company. So my film program is a production company. In fact, we have been designated by the legislature as a private-public partnership called DSU Films. And we do production work for outside clients, and the students are the crew. And they get paid for coming and doing the job. All of a sudden it becomes real where, okay, there's a call time of 7 tomorrow morning, and if I want to get paid, I need to be there at 7. If I'm there at 7:02, they'll leave without me and I won't get paid. there's a lesson there that you don't get out of a textbook.
What is the best advice Ed Sabol ever gave to you?
He had this acronym, it was FLAP. I heard him say it a few times and didn't connect what he was talking about. In fact, he had t-shirts made up that all the crew guys had to wear, and it said FLAP on the front and the back. And that meant finish like a pro. Just because you show up and you get some of the fun of making films, but you don't stick around and put all the equipment away in the right way and get it back in the equipment room, you're not done until all that is done, and that's FLAP, finish like a pro. I think you can apply that to anything, you know, especially when young students, maybe they haven't been put in the position where they have to adhere to, you're not done yet, I'll tell you when you're done, and then finally you'll know when you're done. And that's FLAP. So I think that's as good as any.
Yeah. If you never went to NFL Films, what would have been the Phil Tuckett story?
I don't know. Since I didn't know such a thing existed until I walked in the door, you know, I probably would have ended up coaching or I don't know. I mean, I had a degree in English, and I'd written that article. It was in the magazine, and I was kind of thrilled about that because I'd always been straight jockdom, you know, all through high school and everything. That was my only means of self-expression. That's the way I looked at myself in the world, and other people looked at me. I didn't do any of the other stuff, you know, just enough to get by. But then when I wrote that article and saw my photograph with the article I'd written, I thought, that's pretty great, you know? That's something that's even better than scoring a touchdown. And so I probably would have been a writer, but nothing to do with film. When I first walked into the first day at NFL Films, Ed Sabol says, come over here and sit down. And he had a piece of 16 millimeter film. He said, okay, now we're going to start from the beginning. This is the emulsion, and it lays on top of the base, the celluloid, and then the chemicals with the emulsion. And this is what gets exposed, and this is what the movie's made out of. He handed it to me, and I looked at it like it was the Rosetta Stone or something. It was like, oh my goodness, I never imagined. Of course, now film is long gone. Nobody looks at film anymore. But the equivalent is when a student sits down at an editing bench and starts to manipulate the captured electrons and make it look like images that are going through. We call our program digital film, and I've had people say, well, it can't be digital film. It's either digital or it's film. But it's not. It's digital capture of electronic images that are meant to look like film. So that isn't a misnomer at all. Digital film is a real thing. It used to be film, and it used to be videotape, and now it's digital film. So that's what we call it.
In the NFL, there aren't any second chances at a live shot. How would you go about capturing those big moments?
I love documentary films because there isn't a second take. And at Dixie, we have a documentary film festival that's only documentaries. It's called DocuTah. And I see every film that's submitted, and I can tell a fake instantly, you know, where they've done a take two on something, and it's very, you know, self-conscious and everything. And I love the fact that in true documentary film, which is what we were doing, it was enhanced reality. It was slow motion. It was the coaches wired for sound. It was telephoto lenses. But it was still one take. Are you going to get it or not? And if you're relying on a second take, you shouldn't even be there because you'll fail. You'll be drummed out of your position. So in my case, I had the advantage of 14 years of watching football from the sidelines. So when I started shooting a camera, which is what I did along with editing and writing and directing, I was uncanny in my ability to be in the right place at the right time to get the big shot. And so it's an instinct, it's a natural gift that you might have, and we prized that highly. We didn't ever have our cameraman attached to a director saying, okay, now go down to the 20-yard line, and they may do this. If anybody tried to do that, we'd just take it off and throw it down, because we were all on our own to get that shot at the moment and don't have an excuse. Oh, I started late, so, oh, the official got in my way. Oh, there is no excuse. You either get it or you don't. And that's what I loved about it, you know, the unforgiving nature of it.
What game stands out the most that you've attended?
Yeah, wow. Well, as I said, I went to 30 Super Bowls, and the majority of those were boring, really. There have been many Super Bowls that were over at halftime, and all of the hype made it even worse, you know, because of the letdown of how bad the games are. Lately, they've been better since I left. I don't know what that is. But so I'm thinking back to a game that I loved that had to do with just a regular season game. And the New York Giants were playing the Philadelphia Eagles, big rivalry. And all the Giants had to do was run the clock out. And now the quarterback just takes a knee. Back then, for some reason, they didn't do that. They would give it to, in this case, it was Larry Zonka, the big fullback, who never fumbled. So that Joe Pisarcik of the Giants handed it to Larry Zonka. He dropped the ball before he was even hit, and Herm Edwards of the Eagles picked the ball up. Now, nobody could have predicted that play. Years later, I think I told somebody I predicted it, but I didn't. All I was doing was, everybody had left the field, all the photographers. I knew that if anything happened at the end of the game, it was going to be into that end zone if the Giants did a turnover. So I went into the end zone, and he dropped the ball, and I had it perfectly framed. I went down to the ball. I went up with the ball as it bounced into Herm Edwards' hands. Then he ran right at me. I know Herm. Years later, he told me, I just ran for the only person in the end zone, and it was you. And so he ran right into my lens, and then he circled around, and I followed him onto the bench. And that became known as the Miracle of the Meadowlands. And I still have the note, that Ed Sabol wrote and left on my desk the next morning. And it was, how in the effing hell did you ever get that? But not effing. But it was a moment in time that, it made the game special for me, because my job was to get that moment and the defining moment of the game, and that's what I did.
Now, you've won 30 Emmys. Compare the first to the 30th.
Well, the first, it was, I didn't even know I'd won it, because for some reason we didn't get invited to the ceremony. And so the next week, somebody just came up and handed it to me, and it was like, hey, you won an Emmy. Oh, okay, thanks for inviting me. And then I started to go to the ceremonies, and then once again, it's like the Super Bowls. You get 30 of them, and somewhere like 18 or 19, you start saying, okay, that's fine. I mean, I'm not belittling it, but some of my favorite work I've ever done didn't get mentioned. And some stuff that was decidedly mediocre won these Emmys. I think anybody would say that in any awards ceremonies. It's not always your best work that gets given to you. But I've given them away to my children and my grandchildren. I think I gave one to a next door neighbor that I like. I don't know. They've gone to the four winds, and I think we have, my wife and I have 3 left or something.
In the early 1980s, Journey's tour manager approached you at a 49ers game about creating a video for the band. Can you tell us about that story?
I was kind of a heretic right from the beginning, because I wanted to do things other than football. immediately when Ed Sabol showed me that piece of film, I wanted to do stuff other than football. I didn't tell him that, of course, but it was like, okay, I've done that since I was 8. I know the subject matter, that's good. But now, what else can you do with all this magic equipment that they've got around here? So we had done a couple of music videos that I went out and talked to people in that business. I said, who better to do a music video of a concert than the football guys who know there's no second take? So they're going to get the first thing that happens on stage. And so we had a little bit of a track record, but I was filming the game, and I heard somebody behind me, it was a 49er game, say, oh, we love you guys. We love NFL films. We love John Facenda. Oh, and it was just like this person that I tried to see him, and I looked over my shoulder, and finally at a timeout, I turned around and said, what are you talking about? And he said, we're the management group for Journey. And our manager, Herbie Herbert, sent me down on the field. He saw you down there. He sent me down here to ask if you could do a film about his group, like they're headed for the Super Bowl. And John Facenda, your narrator, needs to narrate it. And I said, okay, if you got enough money, we'll do it. I mean, I was open to that because I liked the challenge of doing other things. So it was in San Francisco on a Sunday. I took the red eye back to Philadelphia. I walked into my office the next morning, and there was a cardboard box this high full of Journey stuff, hats and shirts and underwear, everything with Journey on it. And I told him my kids were big fans because they were teenagers at that point. And so I was just impressed that the merchandise, the swag, as they call it in the business, got back to the office before I did. And so we put it together, and we made a film called Frontiers and Beyond, and we, being the NFL Films crew, followed Journey on a cross-country tour. And we weren't with them all the time, but while we were with them, we had our own tour bus. So we were right there. When the bus broke down in the mountains, we were there. They were trying to get it going. And when they ran short of transportation to get to the next gig because something had happened, I was there when the tour manager was peeling off hundreds, to rent a bunch of stuff to get people where they. And the film turned out so great because it was a behind the scenes of a team headed towards their Super Bowl. And the only problem was the film was about the roadies, because we identified with the roadies. The band, they were all, it was okay, the music was great, everything, but they weren't as interesting as people as the roadies. So, and Herbie Herbert, the manager, loved the roadies. So he encouraged me, and I was the director and editor on it, he encouraged me to make it about the roadies, which didn't go down well with the band. And so he caught a lot of heat for that. But if you go to any tour bus in America, or maybe the world now, and you find the oldest roadie and ask him if he's ever seen Frontiers and Beyond, he will say yes. He'll have his own copy, because that was their holy grail. This is who we are. This is a whole movie about us. Screw the band, And I did an interview with Marilyn Manson one time for a film I did called Faces of Evil, and two of the tour guys, the roadies, came up, and they got down on their knees and did the "we're not worthy" thing. And I had no idea what they were doing. And they said, they just told me that you did Frontiers and Beyond. That's the greatest film ever made. I've seen that 400 times. So it was fun. And that got me started doing documentaries for the History Channel and for TNT, and really set me up for what I do now as an instructor. Because if it was just football films, it's too one-dimensional. but I've done a little bit of everything, including some feature work. I was the second unit director on Rudy, for instance, in charge of all the football work. So, you know, that kind of wanderlust of, I don't want to just do football, I want to do these other things. And eventually, I was named vice president of special projects. I still did football, but whenever I could bring in a music video, and I did a bunch of stuff, Slayer, Metallica, I got into a heavy metal thing pretty heavily. And, but a bunch of different stuff, and Cyndi Lauper, and Stevie Ray Vaughan, all kinds of stuff. And that's what kept my creative juice going. You know, if you have to do the same film over and over, no matter how good it is, and we had the NFL film style going for us, I needed more creative input, you know, cross-pollination of different ideas. And I think I use that to good advantage with my students now.
In 2008, you left NFL Films and returned to your alma mater to direct the film department at Dixie State. What was that challenge like?
Well, it was 2008, and NFL Films had been pretty much dismantled by Roger Goodell and his minions. And I couldn't go in there and face it, because for 37 years I'd looked forward to going to work every day, and now I didn't. And so, you know, I took the high road and said, well, I think, you know, I'm going to retire. I don't think I ever said retire. They said retire, I just gracefully left. Although I subsequently did an interview with a Philadelphia newspaper where I wasn't so graceful about my my characterization of my leaving, which I'm persona non grata there now because of it. But at that point, I was in St. George, Utah. I mean, what could they do to hurt me there, you know? And I was just frustrated. But once it kicked in, now I could go and I could be the Ed Sabol of the Dixie State University film program. And that it just struck me. I'm going to develop this program the same way we developed NFL Films. And so it was a return. I had played there out of high school when I was a junior college in 1964, when there were 260 students and 100 of us were football players. So now I was coming back to a four-year school, and they actually cared about academics and stuff like that, so I had to get whipped into shape pretty quickly. But yeah, we are a program that cares deeply about the welfare of the students, what they're learning, what opportunities they have, and learning by doing. It's the same way I learned how to make films at NFL Films. Ed Sabol said, go cut this piece together of the hardest hits. And you either shrink from that responsibility or you embrace it. And my personality is that I embraced it. And I think when I see that light in a student's eyes, when I say, yeah, you've never shot a camera before, but here's a $40,000 camera with lenses, and once you're trained properly, you can take that out and you can make your own films. And we'll support you in that effort. I call it the fire in the belly. Everybody wants to make movies, but who has the fire in the belly to actually go through with all of the crap you have to go through to make a movie? It's fun, I love it, but it's not easy, and there's no 9-to-5 component to it. So that's what we teach our students. If you want to do this, you'll see how it's done, and then it's up to you to take the next step. And I would say, and I believe this wholeheartedly, that any student that wants to be in film and devote themselves and has this fire in the belly is going to be successful in finding a job and finding a career. Just like Ed Sabol said, I'll teach you something you can do the rest of your life. What kind of offer is that? How can anybody offer you that? And yet that's exactly what happened with me. I'm 73 years old, and I'll go back tomorrow, and we have a huge project for a documentary that'll be on our Doc-Utah Film Festival, and we have 82 hours of footage that we're editing down right now into the finished product. And I can't wait to get back. It makes you bleed from every pore to do a job like that. But how much fun can you have in this life? And so that's what we're doing. And so the students get those opportunities. And there are some people who say, well, a film degree means nothing. You know, I have people, you know, in the faculty who don't even think that the film is a valid academic enterprise. But right now, at this particular time, and it has been for the last 10 years, ever since I started there, anybody that wants to get a job in film and be successful and earn a living doing it, they can do it. With social media, with YouTube, if you got talent and you're going to stick with it, you'll get discovered, you'll get found out that you're capable. I had one student who came to me and he was, you know, kind of shaky and had tears in his eyes, and it was in the middle of the semester, and he said, I hate to do this, but I'm going to have to leave before the semester's over. And I thought he had some family issue that he had to go tend. And I said, well, yeah, what's wrong, you know? Yeah. You know, I'll give you my blessing and a recommendation if you want it. He said, well, I've been making films on YouTube about tiny cooking. And a company in Argentina saw them, and they've hired me to do tiny cooking films for YouTube. And I had seen his film, and his grandmother had given him this little kitchen set, a little tiny stove, a little pan, and so he puts it on, he heats the stove up, and he gets an eyedropper full of egg, and he drops one drop of egg in there, and he makes an omelet with the little pieces of ham and vegetables, and then he flips it over, and then he gets a little fork and knife, and he eats it. That was the thing on YouTube that got the attention of this company that wanted to hire him and pay him a pretty good wage. I said, listen, you're here to get a job in the industry. Go do it. Don't spend 5 more minutes on campus. You go do it, because that's what you're here for. And that's the kind of impetus that we want to give our students. You know, you just stay as long as you need to get started and get on your way. Most students stay the whole 4 years because it's a wonderful opportunity to have a whole like a production company around you. I act in your film, you do the audio in my film. You have the safety net of like-minded artisans of the craft, and that's great. And plus, we have hundreds of thousands of dollars of equipment that they're able to use. So I'm not encouraging people to leave early, but if one of these jobs, thousands, maybe 100,000 different possibility of jobs in the industry, if that comes up, grab it. I don't want to see you again until you come back with all the awards you won. And maybe donate to a program, you know, that would be the only thing. Make enough money that you can give us some money back.
What is Doc-Utah?
Well, when I first went on campus, I met with the president of the university at the time, and he said, you know, what kind of things can we do to get people excited about our new program? And I said, we ought to have a documentary-only film festival, because there are thousands of film festivals like Sundance with, well, there's not 1,000 like Sundance, because that's at the top, but that show scripted films and a few documentaries. There's only a handful that only show documentaries. And he said, oh, that's a good idea, let's work on that. And as I walked out of his office, I thought, that had never crossed my mind. I had never thought of that before. It popped out of nowhere. Well, I'd been making documentaries all those years, but I'd never thought, oh, what about a documentary-only film festival? It was the weirdest space cadet thing I've ever done, where I just said something without thinking. And now we're going into our 10th year. So it wasn't a bad idea. And we have 65 films over 5 days culled from 350 submissions from 29 countries. I mean, we have films from all over Europe, from Madagascar, from India. For some reason, and well, the reason is because we have made ourselves available to the foreign markets, and they know the film will get shown in a high-profile way in the United States. None of these films will ever be seen on Netflix, but they're great. They're quirky and funny and insightful and well-produced. And so we're looking forward to this year to having our strongest lineup of films in the history of DocUtah. And then our students get a chance to interface with the filmmakers who come in. They give master classes, they do Q&A after the screenings. We have one film called A Song for My People, and it's by a filmmaker who took an incident from his youth where the preacher in a Black Baptist church said, you know, when white folk go to the pearly gates, then St. Peter says, come on in. When black folk go to the pearly gates, all their relatives who are in slavery are there. And they say, what did you do with your freedom? And from that, he wrote this piece of music that's unbelievable. And it's gospel, it's rhythm and blues, it's rap, it's everything of the musical heritage of these people, called The Song for Our People. So now we're not only showing the film, our students are going to perform with the musicians that made the song, including one of them who's a tap dancer, and he does part of the song in tap dancing rhythm. And our dance group is going to be up on stage tap dancing with this guy. He's going to teach him the moves. And so you have the film about how it was made, how it was recorded, and then you have it performed live on stage. That's DocUtah. It's not just sitting down in a dark room and watching a film. So we would encourage anybody who wants to have the full experience of what film can do, you know? The inspirational, the educational. Come down to Dixie State University the first week in September, and we have 65 of them you can pick from.